Welcome to the Great Place to Work CEO Masterclass webinar. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands on which we all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. Thank you for joining us for today's masterclass on purpose-driven adaptive leadership with Bellroy founders Lina Calabria and Andy Fallshaw. Today is the fourth and final masterclass in our series, featuring the leaders at the helm of Australia's #1 micro, small, medium and large best workplaces. Before kicking off, I'd like to say a few words about Great Place to Work. Great Place to Work is the global authority on workplace culture. And since 1992, we've surveyed more than 100 million employees around the world and used those deep insights to define what makes a great workplace experience. It boils down to trust. We help organisations quantify their culture and produce better business results by creating a high trust work experience for all employees. Great Place to Work has published the definitive annual list of best places to work in Australia since 2008, and we use our unparalleled benchmark data to recognise Great Place to Work certified companies and the best workplaces in more than 60 countries around the world. Everything we do is driven by our mission to create a better world by helping every organisation become a great place to work for all. Now, let me introduce Lina Calabria and Andy Fallshaw, COO and co-founder at Bellroy. Lina is an engineer and business leader. With 20 years business experience, growing and improving performance, Lina has established her ability to foresee emerging opportunities and problems and proactively capitalise on or forestall them. Prior to Bellroy, Lina worked as a management consultant and has held the roles of CFO and Chief Sales and Marketing Officer. Lina leads with a focus on shared learning and development, considering alternative perspectives and applying care and attention to all facets of the company, the people within it and the wider world around us. In this way, she draws the best out of every situation and person by identifying and optimising fundamental drivers and important leverage points. Andy Fallshaw is a product designer, engineer and brand shepherd with a global conscience. As the CEO and co-founder at Bellroy and a co-founder of Carryology, he aims to inspire better ways to carry out everyday things. With a background heading up two major divisions of global surfwear empire Rip Curl, starting an investment group and spending years immersed in European design consulting, Andy's experience is woven from design, engineering, brand management and business. With a focus on continuous improvement through learning and development with product systems and people, and his adaptive leadership style inspires better ways in all aspects of business and the wider world in which it operates. 10 years ago, at a kitchen table in Victoria's iconic Bells Beach, Lina and Andy set out their first designs for a slim, stylish men's wallet. And today, Bellroy is a globally renowned designer and retailer of bags, backpacks, and accessories. As the company has grown, it's doubled down on its founding principles of using the power of business to help solve social and environmental problems, building an open and trusting workplace culture. The #1 small best workplace's high trust culture is reflected in its Trust Index employee survey results. Taking everything into account, 100% of its employees say the company is a great place to work. Bellroy scored an incredible average 97% across the whole Great Place to Work model of all of the Trust Index statements. Two of those that stood out in particular are 100% of employees say management is honest and ethical in its business practices, and 100% of employees say management recognises mistakes as part of doing business. Lina and Andy today will be interviewed by Sean Aylmer, one of Australia's most experienced and respected journalists. Sean was editorial director at Fairfax Media, the most senior journalist in the group. I'd like to welcome Lina and Andy and hand over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Sam. Andy, let's get straight into it. Tell us about Bellroy. How did it come about? What does it do?
I think Samantha gave a great introduction there, but I think we often think of ourselves as quite a design-obsessed brand, and we are trying to change how people move through the world. So the main activity you see from us is bags, wallets, tech accessories, and those products we use to carry things with us. But very much the business as a force for good is a mantra that is shared with the B Corp organisation, of which we have been a B Corp since 2015. And for us, that means we're taking a lens of how can we have the most positive impacts for humans, animals, and the planet in the way we go about business.
Okay, and just tell us a little bit about the types of products you sell, where you sell them, just a few of those sorts of details about Bellroy.
Absolutely. So we have, we began in slim wallets. So we began with this theory that wallets were too bulky and we knew how to make them slimmer. But we then moved into all the sorts of phone cases and pocket contents that could be optimized, how you carry keys, phone cases and tech. Then we moved into pouches, bags, carry luggage, and the other items that just help you navigate that. We sell through our own Bellroy.com, which is translated into multiple languages, multiple currencies, warehouses around the world. We then sell through premium digital marketplaces around the world. So Amazon, Tmall, Rakuten, those sorts of things. We sell through corporate sales. So many great companies like to gift their staff good things. And then we sell through many retailers around the world that are what we consider more premium retailers who have shop fronts or e-commerce sites that like to hold a good selection of carry goods.
Fantastic. Lina, I might bring you in here. How has Bellroy gone about building this high trust culture, which of course is critical to having a great workplace?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think to start with, we genuinely believe that having a high trust culture is just the only way to do all the things that Bellroy needs to do to make the products in the places that, and send them into the places that Andy was talking about. But I suppose it's not enough for, I guess, Andy and I to say, hey, we're a high trust culture. I think the next step is that we need to really pay attention to who else is in the company. And we like to say that the Bellroy culture is full of smart people with good intentions who get shit done. And I think that when you know that they're the people that you're working with and you know that that's what we're recruiting for, it's the beginning of being able to feel comfortable that you can trust each other to have at least those things and know that that's what everyone's focused on. I think a useful example of how we do that is how we make decisions. And we think a lot about decision-making proxies. So who could you trust to make a decision for you? And so rather than Andy and I having to be the ones that are always making decisions, we think about, well, are there two people who could make this decision instead of me? And we very much say to our managers, rather than you having to make every decision, could you think about the three people who could align together to make this decision for you, and then you don't have to be involved in it? And hopefully that kind of thing helps people see that we really do value trusting how amazing our staff is. And those examples help people know that we do trust them and that trust is something that's really important for us.
So when you devolve that responsibility, Lina, obviously people have to make decisions and have to make calls, but they're going to sometimes make wrong calls. Now, what Sam said in that introduction was that 100% of your staff said it was okay. There's no blame game. It was okay to make a mistake. That's pretty incredible, given you're handing over so much responsibility to them.
There's a real difference between whether a decision was the right decision or not, given the information you had, and whether a person did the wrong thing. And for me, for us, it really feels like whether the person did the right thing or not is never the question. It was, what was the information we had at hand and how did we convert that information to a decision? And what could we have done differently next time? And I think the other thing that we're very much doing is whenever someone says, I got that wrong, I think we all kind of have this, oh, cool. Okay, well, let's talk about that and really value ourselves saying we got it wrong and showing to other people when they get it wrong that we're like, yeah, that's cool. How do we deal with that? So yeah, hopefully we signal that that's a really good thing to do.
Well, I mean, that is a great trust culture when you can do that. Andy, what about Bellroy's values and how they've guided your approach, particularly in the last 12 to 18 months during COVID?
Yeah, I think, there's lots of different ways to think about values. You can have values on a wall that are, you're prescribed for values. I think we saw lots of values on Enron's wall that weren't really lived day to day, and we saw what that did. So I think values that are really lived and nuanced and understand the context that they're in. So, I mean, speaking of that last 12 to 18 months, for a carry brand, we make products help people move around the world. COVID was a direct headwind. It was pretty brutal. People stopped moving anywhere. And so it was a great test of values because we saw many competitors stand stuff down. We saw many panic, batten down the hatches and sort of put people on the unemployment heap. And we didn't want to do that. So one of the things we've always done is valued a resilient business and organisation. So we were in a great place coming into COVID. We were growing well. We had money in the bank. We were ready there. And so we decided to keep the team together and trust their ability to innovate our way out of it. We have a metaphor we sometimes talk about where there's an elevator to success, but some other things are in control of it. You're not in control. We try to take the stairs. And as you take the stairs, you're building muscle. You're able to go up or down a few stairs at a time. You're more in control of it. And so that's an example of one of the sorts of lived values of all the preparation before a crazy storm like COVID meant we were valuing a trusting area with staff that were great and could pivot and understood agility and how to change plans. We trusted them to be able to innovate our way out of and sure enough, quickly we found the green shoots. We moved resources to those. We updated plans. We backed them, and our staff have done just a remarkable job of bringing us back into growth, back into strong business again. I think that's an example of values that don't live on a wall really, but are just layered through the fabric of the organisation.
Am I right in saying, Andy, that you had to pivot from a travel range, which was supposed to be coming out?
Yes. April 2020 was launched for a whole range of travel bags that would be great for airline travel and other things. We did still release those, but very quietly. We just sort of quietly updated them. And then we moved focus much more to tech accessories, work accessories. How were people going to work remotely now? Did they need new setups for those things? How did they move from a kitchen table to a study to maybe a coffee house outdoors to have a meeting? So yes, the timing for that one wasn't great, but we didn't sort of stick our head in the sand and bulldoze ahead anyway. We pivoted and found the other areas.
Lina, just bringing you into this one, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about supply chain challenges and those sorts of things that are out of your control. Sometimes it is distribution, sometimes it's supply chain, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of another gift that COVID has given many businesses around the world. But yeah, at the moment, I guess what we're seeing in supply chains is that materials are difficult to source. All the way through to freight is difficult to procure and organise, and we've all seen lots of images of ships, waiting out at sea to dock and unload. And I think what's going on is that what we're also seeing is really high predictions for economic performance in a lot of the key countries around the world. And so on top of the material and the freight problem, you've got capacity constraints as well. And I think this creates sort of a lot of tension for a company like Bellroy, who is, sourcing materials, producing products, and then trying to get them to customers. But on the other side of the coin, these are all good problems to have. The much more difficult problem is the one where you've got a quiet factory that would like some more orders and no customers who want to purchase. So they're good problems to have. I think the theory of constraints has been this very old school sort of idea that became popular in the 80s that we've always used to manage our supply chain. And it essentially says, you have to basically start with where is the constraint within the whole network, organize everything else around that constraint, and then work like crazy to improve that constraint. And I think for us, as we try to work out how do we navigate all these supply chain challenges, it's always TOC, theory of constraints. And, I sort of bringing that to life. A really interesting example is some of our products are air freightable and some of them are sea freightable. And sea freight is really slow and challenging at the moment, as we're sort of saying, with all the ships out in the ocean, but you can get some air freight pockets. And so for us, what that means is bringing our teams together and saying, okay, we can get our smaller items in and our lighter items in, and how do we pivot our campaigns so that we're bringing in the products that actually are light enough to be able to go on air freight. And that's like a standard theory of constraints response to the freight problem. And actually Andy talking about like the worst time in a century to launch a travel campaign in April 2020 is like another TOC example. It's like, well, we've got travel products, but if the demand's not there for them, we have to find another avenue that makes sense for us. And so I think TOC really brings this very agile approach to responding to challenges. And I think it's really valuable for supply chain issues at the moment.
And that must have demonstrated the benefit, though, of devolving responsibility down the line a bit too, because it wasn't just you and Andy who had to work out these sorts of challenges. You had teams of people.
We have teams of people, and they are always thinking about, what are the ways that we could respond to this particular situation. And I think we are both forever grateful for their brilliant ideas.
So Andy, why are you number one great place to work?
I mean, it was interesting. This was our first time entering the awards, and we certainly weren't expecting it. We were hoping we'd place well, but winning was a real delight. I think in hindsight, that all the years of trying to build a trusting, empowered group that know how to work together, know how to solve problems, that must have helped. I think as a culture, we always talk about valuing art and science, like the humanities and the maths and sciences and the more deductive reasoning based things. And there's a real culture of we're not just fashion people, we're not just data geeks, where we value all of them, and we try and build coordination where all of those skills can come together and form an opinion. And so I think what that means is you can really bring your whole self to work. We create a challenging environment, but very supportive. We're very careful with who we bring in. As Lina said, smart people, good intentions, who get shit done. The recruitment process is difficult to get through, but then once it's in, you trust that those around you are motivated by similar things. They share similar values. They have similar aspirations. And so I think it's just evidence that our crew love that environment. Everyone's committed to a great culture and that environment. We don't carry people who undermining that environment. We don't distort incentives. So these are all sort of ways of in post trying to understand how it happened. And it is a culture that we just love being a part of and we're very proud of. So I think we're seeing evidence that our crew love that culture too.
Yeah, clearly. And maybe Lina, this one's for you. How much more what Andy's talking about then is actually having a real purpose as well. And when we sort of bring in things like climate change considerations, ESG, sustainability, ethical considerations, are those sorts of things that are more important to people now than they have been previously?
Look, I think that these issues are super important. And I think whenever I sit in on our recruitment interviews, what I absolutely see people say, because one of our questions is, why did you apply for this role? And people say, I want to work for a business that has a purpose beyond the profit. And so I think what we definitely see is that not only is it something that I notice our staff are very proud of, but I think that it's super important from a recruitment perspective as well. And I think, one of the things that's really lovely is watching of all of the stories that we tell about Bellroy, a lot of our staff repost them, if it's an Instagram post or a Facebook post. And the things they actually repost are the things that are about something that we're doing that isn't about how much money we've made or didn't make or sold or, sales. It's about, other organizations that we're collaborating with or things that we did. Or in fact, this particular award was something that people were incredibly proud of. And so I think we definitely see that it's super important, and it's actually not just a ticket to the game, though. I think it's even more than that. It's a thing that sort of selects really excellent people to want to be part of your journey.
Okay, and the final question for both of you, and I'll stay with you, Lina. What does being number one on the Great Place to Work mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, it means like all of the good things that you sort of would expect. But I think the thing that it really meant for me personally was that we're a high growth company. We can be a challenging environment because whether it's COVID or supply chain issues, there's always a constraint. There's always something that breaks when you're growing quickly. And you never quite know whether the people are like energized by that or deflated by that, or are they like really excited by those challenges or not. And I think that the thing for me was seeing how pleased everybody was about the culture that we'd created and the work that they were doing. Sort of felt like, okay, I think they like it and we should keep doing it like this. This is a really, really good sort of endorsement.
Andy?
I think Lina summarized that really well. I think we have lots of ways of asking our employees how they're going, asking our crew, working with them on their goals and drivers, but you don't often get a chance to step back and sort of really survey them in depth. We have frequent touch bases. All our managers work with their crew regularly, but to sort of come out and then do it in a like project and then be able to benchmark that against others, that's something we don't have. We have anecdotes. We know that our crew hang around for a long time. You know, they stay working with us for a long time. We hear stories. Sometimes people leave and then they start saying, oh, what did I do? Why did I leave? And you have that, but to then actually be able to benchmark it against that same process and that same project being done in multiple businesses around Australia and the world at the same time is just a wonderful, heartening way to say, you know, relatively we think we're doing well, but on an absolute scale, we really are. This is a culture that everyone's bought into and invests in and cares about and nurtures. And it's incredibly heartening to have that acknowledgement of that.
Thank you. Andy, Lina, thank you for sharing your insights and congratulations on being number one Great Place to Work. Sam, back to you.
Oh, thank you, Sean. And I'd like to warmly thank Lina Calabria and Andy Fallshaw, COO and CEO of Australia's #1 Best Small Workplace 2021. I hope everyone listening feels inspired to create better ways in business and the wider world in which we operate. I know I do. Today's session is the final of our 4 masterclasses with Great Place to Work's 2021 Best Workplaces winners. Videos of the past masterclasses are available on our website along with our blogs, and the interviews are also on our YouTube channel. So please follow Great Place to Work on LinkedIn to stay up to date with our interviews and other events and blogs. And just before I sign off, a quick reminder that if you'd like to start your journey to becoming a great place to work and achieving recognition on the best workplaces list, the first step is to become Great Place to Work certified. So thank you for joining us today. Please refer to the chat for how to join and follow our community. I'm Sam Huddle. Thank you for joining us.